today's video, we are going to discuss the Pythagorean theorem. Our learning targets for today are I can explain the Pythagorean theorem, and I can use the Pythagorean theorem to find unknown side lengths of right triangles. So right triangles. In a right triangle, the two sides adjacent means next to the right angle are known as the legs, or A and B. The side opposite from the right angle is called the hypotenuse, or C, and the hypotenuse is always the longest side of a right triangle. So if I look at my figure to the right, I have this little box. This little box tells me that this triangle is a right triangle and contains a 90-degree angle. The sides that are next to that box are called A and B. And then the side opposite is called C, which is my hypotenuse. Now, the Pythagorean theorem tells us how the side lengths of right triangles are related. In any right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So more simply stated, in an equation form, we can use the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, it's very important that you know how to label your legs and your hypotenuse in right triangles. So remember, in my right triangle, the side opposite or across from the right angle is called my hypotenuse, and then my other two sides are the legs, or A and B. It does not matter what side is A and what side is B, as long as they are the legs. So again, I have A, B, and C. Again, A, B, and C. And finally, again, A, B, and C. Notice that your hypotenuse is always opposite that right angle. Now, if I want to use the Pythagorean theorem to find missing side lengths, I can do that. Looking at number 1, I have a side length of 3 inches and a side length of 4 inches. Notice that I don't have C, my hypotenuse. So, using my Pythagorean theorem, I know a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. So if I call my 3-inch side A and my 4-inch side B, 3 squared plus 4 squared will equal c squared. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16, and that will equal c squared. 9 plus 16 is 25. That's equal to c squared. Now I want to get rid of my square. In order to get rid of my square, I use the inverse of squaring, which is the square root. So if I take the square root of 25, that gives me a side length of 5. My unit was inches, so my side length is 5 inches. Now, looking at 4, 5, and 6, I'm given a side length as well as the hypotenuse. So I'm trying to find a missing side length. So looking at number 4, I have a side length of 5 inches and then a hypotenuse length of 13 inches. So I'm trying to find my missing side length. Let's call that B. So 5 inches would be A and 13 inches would be C. So again, my Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. So a squared is 5 squared. I don't know b, so I'm going to leave that as b squared. And c is 13, so I will call that 13 squared. 5 squared is 25. My b squared stays as it is. And 13 squared is 169. I will take away my 25 from both sides. So b squared will equal 144. Again, taking the inverse of my square, I square root. So b will equal the square root of 144, which is 12. My units here was inches, so my side length is 12 inches. Looking at number 7, a rectangular pool at Andy's gym measures 25 meters by 50 meters. How many meters would Andy need to swim in order to swim diagonally across the pool? So if I draw a rectangular pool, I know one of my lengths is 25 meters and the other length is 50 meters. I know Andy wants to swim diagonally across the pool, so I can use the Pythagorean theorem with legs of 25 and 50 to find my diagonal distance c. So again, a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. I know that one leg is 25, so 25 squared. The other leg is 50, so 50 squared will equal c squared. I know 25 squared is 625. I know 50 squared is 2,500. That will be equal to c squared. 625 plus 2,500 is 3,125. That's equal to c squared. Doing the inverse operation of my square is the square root. So the square root of 3,125 will be equal to c. I know the square root of 3,125 is approximately 55.9. So c will equal 55.9 meters. Number 8. A pole vaulter rested a 17-foot pole against a wall. If the top of the pole hit the wall 14 feet above the ground, how far from the wall is the bottom of the pole? So again, drawing a picture here, I have my wall, I have my pole, and then I have the ground. So knowing my pole is 17 feet and my wall is 14 feet, I'm trying to find a side length. So using the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. I can call a 14 and 17 would be c. So 14 squared plus b squared will equal 17 squared. 14 squared is 196. B squared stays as b squared, and 17 squared is 289. Subtracting 196 from 289, I will get b squared is equal to 93. Again, to get rid of my square, I take the inverse, which is the square root. So the square root of 93 will be approximately 9.6. In this case, my unit was feet, so 9.6 feet. The wall is 9.6 feet away from the bottom of the pole. Looking at number 9, what is the area of the largest square? Well, again, Pythagorean theorem tells me a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Notice in my diagram, my areas are already squared. So I can just add my two areas to get my hypotenuse area. So 36 plus 64 would be 100. So the area is 100 units squared. Number 10, if the area of square 1 is 25 units squared and the area of square 2 is 16 units squared, what is the perimeter of square 3? So this one gives me the area of 1 and 2. So 1 is 25 units squared and 2 is 16 units squared. So using those two areas, I can find the area of 3. I would subtract 25 from 16, which gives me an area of 9 units squared. So 3 is 9 units squared. Knowing area of a square, I know area is side squared. Again, the area of 3 is 9, so my side squared would equal 9. Taking the inverse of a square, I square root 9, so a side length is 3 units. Now it asks me for perimeter. Perimeter is adding up all of the sides. There are 4 sides of a square, so 3 times 4 will equal 12. So my perimeter will equal 12 units. In this lesson we learned, in a right triangle, to find a missing leg or hypotenuse length, I can use the Pythagorean theorem, or a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's a wrap on this video. We'll see you in the next one.